within these particular high levels of analysis and evaluation. So Analyse is AO3A, and usually these are all 6-mark questions. And things that your candidates need to do here would be, number 1, draw accurate diagrams. Number 2, make sure that they're very clearly linked to the written analysis. I always tell my students, don't leave it up to the examiner to interpret what you are trying to say on your diagram. You have got to explain it to the nth degree. So do encourage your candidates to do that. Make sure that your candidates answer, again, so important, in context. Really, really important to apply the theory in context. Again, candidates can lose a lot of marks with a lot of great theory and understanding, but not applying it in context. So context, context, context. Answer with respect to the specific economic agent. So oftentimes in these questions, as you will see when we have a look at some examples, candidates are asked to refer to producers or consumers or government or the economy, and just make sure that they're answering with regard to that specific economic agent. Ensure that they develop links and chains of reasoning. We'll say a little bit more about that when we kind of get through the questions. I always tell my students, even if they're not asked to draw a diagram, then just put one in. So most of these questions will begin with using a diagram, analyze such and such. But it's really good practice, I think, to get your students to draw diagrams, because it forces them into the analysis, because in order to describe the diagram, they are in effect analysing it. So it's a great way to kind of force them into it. And again, know the marking grid. And this, I guess, comes back to as one of the questions which has just come through. So this relates to quality, not quantity. And we'll say a little bit more about that when we have a look at the mark grid. And then lastly, kind of the bane of many's an examiner, make sure that work which has been completed on a digital paper, make sure that that has been kind of signposted to the examiner. You'll see some examples of that. It's just good practice, and it just makes sure that none of your candidates' work goes awry and doesn't get marked. So here's the grid, and as I was saying, make sure that your students know the grid and its quality rather than quantity of points. So when you're marking one of these analyze or evaluation questions for that matter, we're looking for the level of best fit as opposed to a specific number of application or analysis points. And I think you'll see that whenever we have a look at one or two of these sample questions. The way I tend to mark these would be to read the entire answer just from top to bottom. I think even just from straight off the bat from the diagram, you get a good idea as to whether you're dealing with a candidate who really knows their stuff. Read it straight from top to bottom. Have a look out for the knowledge, the application and the analysis, and then you can, once you've read the entire answer, you have a good feel then as to whether it fits into level 1, level 2 or level 3, and then you can kind of adjust up and down the specific level with regard to the final mark. So let's have a look at a few of these. So I've got quite a few of these to run through. So this is the first analyze question. If you've got the examiner's report, you'll see this on the examiner's report. I've written a lot around this particular answer on my annotated script, but I think the first thing to say is this is a great diagram. It's got the whole notion of inelastic supply. On the top right, it's talking about musical instruments, so they're putting it into that framework and into that context. You can see that when this was marked way back in the summer of 2019, got the annotations there from the marker at the time, so we've got application and analysis and knowledge. And I think that's really important. Just from a good diagram, it's possible to get some of these marks, so that's why it's always worthwhile just throwing in a diagram. You can see that this is a good candidate because they've started off with a definition of demand. The next paragraph, one consequence, and they're starting to describe that particular diagram so that we're straight into the analysis. Then the next paragraph, while revenue will fall due to a lack of demand, the amount it falls by is reduced by the inelastic supply. Again, great stuff, tip-top stuff. And then the final kind of paragraph there, again, this really reframes it in the context of the music shop. So we've got a little kind of reference to the case study and the interest rate having risen. So again, that's a really good answer, really well structured. And you can see as well, I think, that you don't need to write reams and reams of paper in order to get a full marks on an Analyse question. And I'll be able to show you the reverse as we go through these. So some candidates who've written an absolute stack, but not actually really reap the benefits of it. So this next one, this is a 3 out of 6. Apologies if it's a bit small for you to see, but this particular candidate, so this is in level 2, this one, and reasonable diagram there. So we can say, having read through that, we can say, yeah, this particular candidate, we've got some basic knowledge there for sure. That's absolutely for sure. But they've been able to apply it to the context, and we can see that from the diagram. They've also then, at the beginning of this question, they've defined demand. Following on from that, they're talking about the music shop, so they're framing it within context. And it's just after that that this particular answer starts to just go a little bit awry, and kind of the cause and effect aspect is a little bit mixed up, and indeed all the way down to where it says a lack of profit made. There's, it's not really what they've said there is not accurate, but they do get it back on track then with the final few lines where they're talking about also a fall in demand may lead to, and it gets back on track there. So yeah, it's not a great answer, but at the same time, it's not a level 1 answer. So this is clearly in the level 2 bracket. We know that they've got their basic knowledge, they've applied it in context, and there's a little bit of analysis there. And so I think, as was the case on this particular awarding, this particular candidate got 3 out of 6 on that one. So this next particular question, this relates to competition between charity shops and how that could affect prices. And again, I think you can see here, so here's a candidate who does actually write quite well, but unfortunately landing in level 1 and just scoring the 2 out of 6. And they don't really start to pick up any marks until kind of halfway down the page, where they start to talk about reducing the price of the products. And then following on from that, in doing so, this would attract more consumers, meaning greater profits and maximising revenue. So there's a little bit of understanding and analysis there, but not a lot else. And so in spite of the fact that they've actually used all of the allocated space, they've only actually got 2 marks out of 6 on that one. So kind of that focus on knowledge, application, analysis, not necessarily lots and lots of separate points of analysis, but just well-developed points of analysis. Two well-developed points of analysis would be sufficient to get your candidates rather 6 marks. So here, if we have a look at this one, so this is a good example of a candidate who has not, they've answered the question. The question didn't ask for a diagram, but they've thrown a diagram in, and it's a good diagram. We can see there's knowledge there. We can see it's been applied in the right way. We can see that if they start to discuss this, they're certainly going to be analysing the right thing. So kind of you already have a flavour that this is a good candidate. The beginning of the first paragraph, they talk about competition between charity shops. So again, applying that in context. Following on from that, as a result, so that kind of stem into your analysis. And then in the second paragraph, moreover, and again, it follows into some more great analysis. So you can see diagram, couple of paragraphs, good analysis, and you're there with your 6 marks. No need to write pages and pages of separate points of analysis. Again, same for this one, so I'll not kind of labour the point too much here, but again, once again, great diagram. I think that we're asked to draw a diagram in this particular instance, but we can see clearly knows their stuff, this particular candidate. They've got analysis with regard to the case study, which is in context. So we're talking about productivity levels in the bottom paragraph there. And the analysis in the second paragraph, whilst it's kind of cause and effect is slightly the wrong way around, they've still got it really. You can see the understanding is there. So there's a clear 6 marker. Okay, here's one which is not so good. So, using a diagram, analyse the possible effect of low business profits on wages. So a few things wrong with this, and I've annotated this onto the annotated presentation. So firstly, they've talked about prices rather than wages. Quantity of what, it's not really clear what we're talking about there. They talk about values when really they mean proportions on line 3. And really, we're struggling to award any marks here, but there's some marks for knowledge, then leading to the business decreasing the amount spent on wages. So there is a little bit of knowledge understanding aspect there, but that's quite clearly a level 1 on a 1 out of 6. This next one is a 4 out of 6, and the only reason I've put this one on is two things. Number one, with regard to the question, it talks about how the changes in unemployment rate shown in the case study would be likely to affect the government's budget. Now, the case study materials showed unemployment rising at certain points and falling at other points, and really to get all 6 marks, candidates really needed to refer to both aspects and then both impacts on the government's budget. You can see in the final 5 lines here, they really start to go off topic and not at NAQs, not answering the question, talking about crime and such like, losing focus. So the first 3/4 of that is okay. We've got knowledge, application and analysis. It's clearly somebody who understands their economics. Unfortunately, they haven't done the flip side of the same coin, and so they get the 4 out of 6 on that one. This is the same question, but for a candidate who's considered both sides. So again, I'll not kind of bore you with reading through that, but both sides of that. And then on the second page here, again, there's some great analysis the whole way throughout this particular answer. There's probably there's more than enough analysis, and they consider both sides. This next one, the question here was with regard to analysing how inflation may affect producers. And again, this was in context clearly, because they talk about producers in the beginning paragraph, and then every paragraph is just great, straightforward application analysis, wage price spiral in the final paragraph, talking about producers all the time. You see it there in the 3rd paragraph, may affect producers, so always in context. So an example of a great answer. And the next one, not so great, 1 out of 6. Again, with regard to the 1 out of 6, really just for knowledge at the beginning. Inflation means that, but nothing more really worthy of merit. And just in the interest of time, I'm just going to push through that one. This is a great example of a candidate who's drawn a diagram, and because they have drawn the diagram, even in spite of the fact that the following explanation was really poor, they got 3 out of 6 for this. So there was clear evidence here that the candidate had knowledge, was able to apply it in context, and there's some evidence of some analysis going on here as well, even though the first sentence of what they've written isn't particularly good. So a 3 out of 6. So it just shows you the importance of knowing your diagrams, I guess. This is the same question, but this is a 6 out of 6. Again, I'm just going to press through that and just kind of tidy up here on the analysis. So these are the ways in which you might like to develop those points of analysis.